He thought I was just another temp in the break room. The kind you can dump work on, set up to fail, and laugh about later. He didn't know the woman standing in the break room was about to fire him, or that she owned the entire company. I watched his face shift from smug confidence to something closer to fear. And in that moment, I realized the truth. What he did to that one employee changed everything I believed. Her real name was Evelyn Harper, 42 years old, CEO of Harrison & Coltech, a company she'd built from the ground up. But today, she wasn't Evelyn. Today, she was Eve, a mid-level admin temp armed with a fake resume, a borrowed office badge, and a single mission: to see her company from the inside out. Whispers had reached her boardroom, rumors of toxic managers, of a culture that punished honesty and rewarded cruelty. She wanted the truth. And she knew the only way to find it was to step off her pedestal and walk through the front doors like everyone else. It didn't take long to meet the team. There was Tommy in IT, the guy who could fix anything, including your mood on a bad day. Jasmine, in customer service, quiet, focused, the kind of person who carried the weight of two worlds, her job and her life as a single mother. And then, there was Greg Whitmore. The golden boy. Crisp suit. Confident smile. The kind of manager whose name was always on the promotion list, and whose shadow seemed to darken the entire floor. The higher-ups loved him. But the staff? They kept their heads down when he walked by. It happened on her third day. Jasmine missed a call, just one, while helping a frustrated customer untangle a complex account issue. Greg didn't ask why. He didn't care. He called her out. Right there. In front of the entire floor. His voice was sharp. Each word meant to cut. Jasmine's face flushed, but she didn't argue. She just swallowed it. Evelyn's hands curled into fists under the desk. And that was the first time. I wanted to rip off my disguise. Evelyn noticed. The first move came quietly. No grand announcement. No obvious confrontation. Just a task dropped on my desk that looked harmless enough. It was from Greg. A set of invoices to process and file before end of day. Except, the client accounts didn't match the numbers in the system. I double-checked. Triple-checked. The errors weren't small, they were intentional. Sound, keyboard tapping grows faster. The faint buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. So I did what any admin temp would do. I flagged the inconsistencies in an email, copying him in, politely asking for clarification. No response. Not for hours. Pause. Office background noise softens, creating a sense of unease. At 4:45 p.m., he walked by my desk. Didn't look at me. Didn't speak. Just dropped another stack of papers and said, "These need to be done by 5." It was impossible. A full day's work in 15 minutes. And he knew it. I stayed calm, typing as fast as I could, knowing I wouldn't make the deadline. At 5:03, I got the email. Forwarded straight to HR. Subject line, performance concern. Greg had reported me for failing to meet deadlines on a task he'd deliberately set up to fail. The next morning, the whispers started. People glanced at me longer than usual. HR called me in for a casual chat. Greg played the part of the helpful colleague, telling HR I might just need more training. I smiled through it, took notes, and quietly began documenting everything: dates, times, copies of emails, even casual conversations. Because I'd seen this game before. And the only way to win was to let the other player think they were winning first. That afternoon, I stumbled onto something else. In the shared drive, tucked inside a mislabeled folder, was a screenshot of a Slack channel I didn't recognize. A private channel. The messages were disgusting. Greg mocking employees by name. Calling Tommy Tech Boy. Calling Jasmine the charity case. And me. A middle-aged nobody who should be grateful for a desk. He didn't know who I was, but the contempt was there all the same. I didn't realize someone was behind me until I heard the whisper. "You'll want to see this before Friday." Jasmine. She slid a small USB drive across my desk, quick and discreet. No explanation. just a look in her eyes that told me she'd been waiting for this moment. I didn't open it right away, because I knew whatever was on that drive could change everything. And if Greg was planning to take Jasmine down by Friday, then Friday was going to be the day everything changed. That night, I didn't turn on the TV. No music. No phone. Just silence, and the small, black USB drive Jasmine had slipped onto my desk earlier that day. It was lighter than I expected, almost weightless, but I knew it could carry the weight of a man's entire career, maybe even his freedom. The desktop recognized it instantly. A single folder appeared on my screen. No flashy name. No cryptic code. Just one word. Proof. Inside, 3 subfolders: audio, emails, and reports. My cursor hovered for a moment before I clicked on the first, audio. If they can't handle the workload, they shouldn't be here. If Jasmine's kid is sick again, that's her problem, not mine. His tone wasn't just cold. It was calculated. I felt my jaw tighten. We've got to hit the numbers by Friday. Push them. And if they can't do the hours, make them. Overtime's unpaid for salaried staff, remind them of that. In the background, I could hear the defeated voices of people agreeing, people who didn't dare push back. Greg didn't just break rules, he weaponized them. This one hit harder than the rest. Once Jasmine's gone, I'll take her client list. Should be enough to lock in that promotion. I moved to the next folder. The subject lines told a story before I even opened them. Urgent, numbers review. Revised client attribution. Need these metrics shifted. In thread after thread, Greg was massaging quarterly sales figures. Moving high-revenue accounts under his own name. Downgrading or reassigning others to make competing managers appear weaker. And the recipients of these emails? 2 senior executives who responded not with outrage, but with approval. He wasn't acting alone. He had protection. Which meant, if I wanted him out, I'd have to make his sins public. The last folder was labeled reports. At first glance, they looked like routine internal audits. But the timestamps told a different story. Several were filed late at night, others on weekends. And worse, the login credentials didn't belong to Greg. They belonged to junior staff. He'd been accessing their accounts without permission, falsifying data, uploading altered reports, and leaving a trail that pointed back to them. This wasn't just corporate politics. This was fraud. The kind of fraud that didn't just end careers, it ended with court dates and legal fees. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the laptop screen the only light in the room. For a moment, I wasn't the CEO. I wasn't the temp. I was just a woman staring at undeniable proof that one of my own had been allowed to rot the inside of this company, unchecked. And then there was Jasmine. The quiet, steady worker everyone underestimated. She wasn't just surviving Greg's abuse, she was documenting it. And she'd been doing it for months, without telling a soul. I realized then, I wasn't here to save Jasmine. She'd been saving herself the whole time. I was here to finish what she'd started. But I knew one more thing. Evidence alone wasn't enough. If Greg's allies in the upper floors tried to bury this, it would vanish before it saw daylight. I needed the right moment, the right setting, and the right audience. And Greg was about to give me all 3. Greg thought Friday would be the day he rose even higher. He didn't know it would be the day he lost everything. That's the thing about people like him. They spend so much time looking down on others, they never notice what's coming up behind them. I spent Wednesday morning doing exactly what he expected me to do, playing the part. I showed up early, coffee in hand, head slightly bowed, giving him the space to mentor me in the most condescending way possible. I let him assign me tedious, pointless tasks. I let him interrupt me mid-sentence in meetings. I even made small mistakes in data entry, just enough for him to feel like he'd caught me slipping. Because every so-called mistake I made was one more opportunity for him to put his fingerprints all over the crime scene. On Wednesday afternoon, I sent out a draft report, not the real one, but a version riddled with deliberate errors. I knew Greg couldn't resist. Sure enough, less than an hour later, The report had been corrected and resent to management from my account. The edits? Exactly the kind of data manipulation I'd seen in the proof Jasmine gave me. Only this time, I didn't just have screenshots. I had a complete activity log, time-stamped, IP-tracked, and stored in a secure folder that Greg didn't even know existed. Thursday morning, I stopped by Jasmine's desk. I told her Greg wanted her to give a short presentation at Friday's meeting, just a quick rundown of your client accounts, I said, acting like I was passing on a request. She gave me a wary look. I could see the fear in her eyes, but also something else. Resolve. She'd been preparing for a fight for a long time, she just didn't know she'd have backup this time. Over lunch, we went through her slides together. Her numbers were flawless, airtight documentation, every client update double verified. Which was perfect, because I knew Greg would try to change them before the meeting. And when he did, the changes would be caught, in real time, in front of the very people who thought he was untouchable. That afternoon, Greg was practically glowing. He strolled into the break room, talking about a new leather chair he was treating himself to once the promotion came through. He bragged to Tommy in IT that he'd be running this place by next week. And then, the call. I was passing by his office when I heard him say it, voice low but not low enough. She'll be gone by noon Friday. I'll take over her accounts by Monday. Hours already on board. That was the moment I knew. Greg had no idea he was already walking into the execution chamber. What Greg didn't know was that every keystroke he'd made this week was being mirrored to an external system. Every file he touched. Every change he made. Every login under someone else's name. I had it all, and on Friday, I'd have the one thing he couldn't explain away, a live demonstration of him tampering with company data. Thursday night, I made one final call to the chair of the board. I didn't give details. Just told him to be in the conference room at 11 a.m. sharp. He asked why. I said, because you're going to want to see this in person. There was a pause. Then, I'll be there. I shut my laptop, leaned back in my chair, and let out the first real breath I'd taken in days. Everything was in place. Greg thought Friday would be his coronation. But by the time the meeting was over, he wouldn't have a title. He wouldn't even have a keycard. Friday morning. The kind of day that feels normal until it doesn't. The office hummed with the usual noise, keyboards clacking, printers whirring, the faint smell of burnt coffee drifting from the break room. But beneath it, there was a tension. Greg felt it too, only he thought it was anticipation. His big day. At 10:45 a.m., I walked into the conference room. Long table. Neutral beige walls. Rows of chairs against the back. Greg was already there, leaning casually against the head of the table like he owned it. He shot me a smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. Ready for the shake-up, Eve? He asked. I smiled back. More than you know. One by one, the department leads filed in. Tommy from IT. Jasmine, clutching her laptop like it was both a weapon and a shield. A few faces from HR, whispering among themselves. And then, right on schedule, the chair of the board slipped in quietly, taking a seat in the back row. Greg didn't notice him. He was too busy rehearsing his victory speech in his head. At exactly 11 o'clock, Greg clapped his hands together. All right everyone, let's get started. He launched into the meeting like he'd done it 100 times, confidence radiating off him in waves. First, a rundown of quarterly numbers. Then, a few jabs about areas for improvement. And finally, the main event. Before we move on, Jasmine, could you walk us through your client accounts? Her voice was steady at first, slide after slide of pristine data, carefully organized. Every figure matched the reports. Every client file was updated. And I knew. Greg couldn't stand it. Halfway through her presentation, Greg leaned toward his laptop. His fingers moved quickly over the keys. To the untrained eye, he was just taking notes. But I knew exactly what he was doing, altering her data live, so that when she reached her next slide, it would look like she'd made a mistake. I'd seen him pull this trick before. What he didn't know was that every keystroke was being mirrored to a display in the board chair's private feed. Jasmine clicked to the next slide, and paused. Her eyes flickered to me for just a second. On the big screen, the numbers were wrong. Greg pounced. That's a significant discrepancy, Jasmine. You've got to be more careful with client records. His voice was full of mock concern. But his smile, that was pure triumph. I stood. Calmly. Greg, I said, before we continue, I think there's something the team needs to see. He frowned, clearly annoyed at the interruption. Eve, can we handle this later? We're in the middle of... No, I said, my voice cutting clean through the room. It has to be now. I walked to the end of the table, reached into my bag, and pulled out a slim folder. Slid it across the polished wood until it stopped right in front of him. Why don't you open it? He hesitated, eyes darting to the others in the room. Then, he opened it. Inside was a printed log, every action he'd taken on Jasmine's file in the last 10 minutes. Timestamps. IP addresses. The exact changes he'd made. The color drained from his face. What is this? He muttered. I stepped closer. That's your resignation letter. Dated today. Signed by me. Murmurs rippled through the room. Greg's hands shook slightly as he set the folder down. You can't, he started. I can, I said. And I am. I nodded to the board chair, who stood and addressed the room. I've reviewed the evidence personally. Mr. Whitmore's actions are in violation of company policy, labor laws, and basic human decency. He looked directly at Greg. Security will escort you out now. 2 uniformed security officers entered. Greg sputtered something about misunderstandings and setups, but no one moved to defend him. Jasmine sat quietly, hands folded, watching the man who'd tried to destroy her be led out of the very room he thought he controlled. But as the door shut behind him, I knew this wasn't over. Because Greg wasn't the only one in this company who'd let the rot spread. And the others were still sitting at this table. The door closed behind Greg, and for a moment, the whole floor held its breath. Not victory. Not yet. Just silence. The kind that follows a lightning strike. Sound, the faint whir of the projector. Papers settling. A chair creaks. I didn't sit down. I walked to the front of the room and connected the laptop. The screen went black, then bright. If Jasmine can't keep up because of her kid, that's her problem. We're not a charity. Gasps. A hand over a mouth. Someone whispers, oh my God. I didn't pause. I let the second clip roll. Push them. Overtime. Unpaid if you have to. They won't quit, most of them can't. That's the beauty of it. The HR lead looked down. Tommy's jaw tightened. Jasmine didn't move. She just stared at the speaker, steady, like she'd been waiting for the truth to finally be loud. Once Jasmine's gone, I'll take her client list. Numbers will look great by Monday. Make sure the execs see it. The room shifted. Not just shock now. Anger. I switched to the emails. Thread after thread. Reassign Westfield to my column. Move the Q2 renewals to my queue. She doesn't need them. Adjust the missed targets in Javier's report, too high. His not partner material. Approvals. Green lights. A pattern. Not an accident, an operation. Sound, mouse clicks punctuate each reveal. I highlighted the recipients. 2 senior executives. Faces paled. The board chair didn't speak. He didn't need to. The message was already in the room. This didn't happen in a vacuum. I pulled up the mirrored activity log, the one from 10 minutes earlier. Timestamps. Account names. The changes Greg made live during Jasmine's presentation. I zoomed in on the IP addresses. The source matched his laptop. The destination? Jasmine's client files. There was no air left for excuses. I faced the team. This is not who we are. Not who we will be. Not after today. I let that sit. Not a speech, just the truth, in the plainest language possible. Jasmine stood, hands at her sides. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. I kept records because I thought no one would believe me. A beat. I believed in this company. I still do. She's Saturday. No theatrics. Just gravity. I turned back to the screen, one last slide. Not about Greg. About culture. A simple list of behaviors. Withholding information to create dependency. Manipulating metrics to win promotions. Public shaming as a management tactic. Silent approval from those in power. I didn't call anyone out by name. I didn't need to. Everyone who had enabled it felt the weight. The board chair stood. Effective immediately, we are commissioning an independent audit. Senior leadership will be interviewed. Policies will be rewritten. If you participated in this, step forward now, or we will find it in the logs. He looked around the room. No one spoke. Which told me everything. I closed the laptop. The projector cooled with a tired sigh. People finally exhaled. Someone started to clap, quiet at first, then stronger. Not for me. For the fact that it was finally over. I walked to Jasmine. You were never the weak link, I said. Her eyes glossed, but she didn't cry. Warriors rarely do, at least not in public. I faced the team again. Here's what happens next, I said. Effective today, no unpaid overtime. Back pay will be reviewed for anyone pressured into it. A protected channel for reporting abuse, run outside HR, promotions paused until the audit is complete. And I looked at Jasmine. Interim team lead, Jasmine Cole. Full authority over her accounts and the client renewal strategy. Shock. Then relief. Tommy smiled first. Others followed. Before we adjourned, I clicked one last file, an email drafted and scheduled by Greg for Monday morning. Subject line, restructure announcement. Inside, a list of underperformers slated for reassignment or termination. Jasmine's name was first. I deleted the draft in front of everyone. Replacement subject line, rebuild. People filed out slowly, quiet, shaken, changed. The board chair lingered. You always had a spine, Evelyn, he said. Today, you gave the company one. I didn't feel triumphant. Just clear. The rot had a face. But the cure had to live in policy, not personalities. As the room emptied, I caught a glimpse through the glass wall. Two executives whispering down the corridor, already calculating the odds. Greg was gone. But the system that made him possible? Still here. And that would be tomorrow's fight. The Friday meeting ended, but the real work had just begun. Greg's shadow was gone, yet the air in the office still carried the weight of years lived under it. People didn't celebrate, not loudly. Not yet. In corporate life, change isn't trusted until it survives the weekend. When Monday came, I arrived before sunrise. I walked the empty rows of desks, the same ones I'd passed as the temp. Screens asleep. Chairs tucked in. Coffee mugs waiting for their owners. This was the company I'd built, and almost lost without even knowing it. Sound, quiet hum of lights clicking on. Soft footsteps. By 8 o'clock, the first employees trickled in. Their eyes flicked toward my office door. Not quite curious, not quite afraid. Old habits. I waved them in. At 9 o'clock sharp, I called everyone to the conference floor, not just management. Everyone. No polished speeches. No buzzwords. Just plain talk. What happened Friday doesn't vanish because Greg is gone, I began. It happened because we didn't have a culture strong enough to stop it. That ends now. I laid it out, line by line. A third-party ethics hotline, outside the reach of internal politics. Back pay for any hours worked off the clock in the last 18 months. Training for managers, not on profits, but on people. An open-door policy that didn't just exist on paper. And one more thing, promotions will now be based on peer reviews as well as performance metrics. Then I turned to Jasmine. Effective today, Jasmine Cole is the new client services team lead. She has full authority over her accounts, her team, and the client renewal strategy. She froze for half a second, then stood, the room breaking into applause before she could even respond. She didn't give a speech. She just said, "I'm here to do the work." And somehow, that landed better than any victory lap could have. The next week wasn't smooth. Some resisted. Old loyalties to Greg, quiet doubts about whether I'd stick around. But piece by piece, the walls came down. Tommy started organizing weekly knowledge shares. HR began sending me direct reports on overtime. People stopped whispering when I walked by. One afternoon, I called Jasmine into my office. I should have known, I said. About all of it. I thought I was building a company where this couldn't happen. She shook her head. You can't see everything from the top. Sometimes you've got to sit at the desk next to ours. She was right. And I knew then, I would never lead from a distance again. A month later, I found myself in the break room, the same place from the moment that started all this. Only this time, Greg wasn't there. Jasmine was. She stood where he once had, laptop in one hand, coffee in the other, answering a junior rep's question with patience instead of poison. Sound, mug clinks softly on the counter. Light laughter in the background. I leaned on the counter, watching her work, remembering the first time I saw her here, head down, shoulders tight, holding in her frustration while Greg tore her apart in front of everyone. Back then, I wanted to rip off my disguise and end it on the spot. Now, I didn't need to. Greg taught me something, not about business, but about people. That a company's real health isn't in the numbers on the quarterly report. It's in the faces of the people who show up every day to make it work. And sometimes, the people you think you're there to save are the ones who save you. I walked back to my office. No disguise. No distance. Just Evelyn Harper, CEO. And part of the team again.